Good morning, everyone. I'm not Marcos Crespo. So we're really pleased to have the Lehman College community involved in this first activity that we're going to have on campus around the census. This is actually a year at Lehman College when we have a big emphasis on civic engagement. And we already have a pretty civically engaged campus, but we're aiming to have that be even more true. Of course, we have the census, which we're talking about today, but we also have, you probably are aware of this, an election coming up. This is a big year for us to be engaged as students, staff, faculty, and we know that the reach that goes out from all of those groups out into the community through families is pretty large. And so we have a pretty major impact if we engage and take advantage of it. You're going to hear from Dr. Jennifer Laird about the history of the census. Maria Matos, who I know will be very engaging in telling you a number of important things about the census, and I think bringing it down to a level that's really important for all of us to understand, because we tend to deal in very large numbers, but actually these large numbers really come down and impact us individually in ways that we probably really are unaware of. So the whole City University is part of two major partnerships, actually. We are a member of the Bronx Borough President's 2020 Census Complete Count Committee, and in addition, Mayor de Blasio and City Council Speaker Corey Johnson announced recently that there was $19 million being allocated for census-related activities, and that is being coordinated by CUNY, the SPS, John Mangalescu's group. And so as a university, we have really taken a major role in this, and Lehman College is right in there and part of it. It's easy to forget sometimes because it's just our background, right, that we live in the largest city in the United States. But given who we are and where we are, of course, we have a tremendous reach, and just the connections that emanate out from all of us and from New York City out into all of the world, really we reach everywhere. But one of the things that is just it's a given in our life today is we live in this 24-hour news cycle. And then, of course, we have some larger cycles also. We have a 2-year and we have a 4-year election cycle that I just mentioned. We really don't do 10-year cycles. It's just really not in our concrete experience. It's not something that I think that we really have an easy time grasping. But that's what we're in now, right? We're in a 10-year cycle. And you're going to hear a lot more about that. But I just as a preview to that, I just have to emphasize that we really have to think in that time frame, because within that 10-year time frame, so many things are going to happen. You think back 10 years, you think about what's happened, you think about the changes that have taken place that could not have been predicted, but have been partially impacted by what's going to happen by this census that will be taken in the spring. Undercounting is a pervasive problem in a lot of places, but certainly in New York City. I was really impressed when I met with Assemblymember Crespo in his office, and we were looking at the detailed maps, which really can show from the last census where there was undercounting. And so we know that happens all the time. It's always an issue, but we also understand that this time around, it's an even bigger issue, and we have major concerns about that not happening, or that we minimize the degree to which that happens. So I want to bring this to a close, but I want to thank all of you for coming today. I think your presence here says a lot. It says that you really care about this and you really understand it. I want to thank our panelists, and I didn't mention Jose Higuera, sorry Jose, from the Mexican Studies Institute, also one of our panelists to present today. I'd like to thank and introduce David Charcape. Where are you, David? There you are, yes. Who is the Assistant Director of the Office of Campus Life at Lehman, and Cassandra Montes, Vice President of the Student Government. And they are going to kick things off. And I will just add that David is our official contact from Lehman College with the larger CUNY effort. So with that, I will say again, thank you for coming and welcome, and hand it over to you.
Thank you, President Lemons, and thank you, each of you, for joining us today for the launch of Lehman College Make the Bronx Count campaign with our first event, Making Sense of the Census, a community panel discussion and Q&A that will explore what the census is, how the information the government collects is used, how it affects the Bronx, and what can we do as a community to ensure that every Bronx resident is counted in the US and the 2020 US Census. A couple of notes of housekeeping we want to mention. This event is being live streamed on the Lehman College website, homepage, lehman.edu, and in our Lehman College Facebook page. A recording of this event will be posted and made available online. We will also be designating the last 10 minutes of the discussion to a Q&A, and we have handed out index cards so that you might write down a question for our panel. We will then collect the index cards prior to the Q&A portion of the event and address the selection of them to our panel. Now I'd like to introduce our esteemed group of panelists who are here with us today to help us make sense of the census. First, we have Lehman College Assistant Professor of Sociology, Dr. Jennifer Laird. U.S. Census Bureau Partnership Specialist, Maria E. Matos from the Bronx Area New York Regional Census Center. Next, who will be joining us shortly, New York State Assemblyman, the Honorable Marcos A. Crespo, who represents Soundview, Clayson Point, Longwood, and Hunts Point sections of the South Bronx. And finally, Jose Higuera Lopez, Deputy Director of the Mexican Studies Institute at the City University of New York, which is here at Lehman College. Welcome to all of you, and thank you again for joining us. Let's start with a little bit of history and context. Dr. Laird, can you explain to our audience what exactly is the census, what are its origins, how it was conceived, and how does it work?
Thank you, David, very much for that. Can you hear me? Okay. So I see many of my current and former students in the audience, which makes me happy because that means you've already heard me talk about the difference between a census and a sample, which is something I teach in my Intro to Sociology Methods course. So a census is simply a procedure for gathering information about a population. So if as a researcher, I wanted to study housing instability among Lehman students, so Lehman students is the population I'm interested in. If I were doing a census of that population, I would try to talk to every single student at Lehman College. Now normally in research, we can't talk to everyone in our population, so we sample. And there's a lot of statistical reasoning that's about how to connect your sample to your population. But just so that you know, a census is a generic term. That just means you're trying to capture information about an entire population. So the framers of the Constitution, I mean, the census has been around for a long time, and the rationale behind the census was when the Constitution was being put together, the framers really wanted the political power in this country to not be based on how much money you have or how much land you have. They wanted it to be based about population distribution. So places that have a larger population should have more power. And that's how the House of Representatives was designed. And so the seats in the House of Representatives are allocated, in Congress, are allocated to states based on the distribution of population. And it's in the Constitution that allocation of those seats in Congress has to be done every 10 years. So to do that, we have to count the population. So the first census actually goes all the way back to 1790, shortly after President Washington was inaugurated. And then it's been conducted in years ending 0 for every 10 years. So it's not just the United States that does a census. Most countries do a census, and the United Nations actually recommends that countries do a census every 10 years. The reason why the census matters, there's many reasons, but on a global level, one is that if you have outdated or inaccurate population counts, so if I don't know how many children are in a certain area, then I won't know where to build schools, for example. So the undercount matters, and it affects how resources, government dollars, are distributed. And as has already been mentioned, there is an undercount that typically happens in the Bronx and in areas around the school. And so that means that to the extent that we're not counting the full population, government, Head Start, food stamps, Medicare dollars are not the number that's being allocated to this area is not to the level that it should be because we're not counting everyone. The last census was held in 2010. The next one will be next spring. So in March, the Census Bureau will begin mailing forms to people's homes, and they will ask, the number of people in the home, sex, age, race of the people in the home. And it's very important, and I'm sure that others on this panel will emphasize this point again, that your answers to the census can only be used to produce statistics. And if you've taken my 301, you know that I say over and over, statistics are simply numerical summaries of a group. So I could produce statistics based on everyone here, the average age. I have that statistic, the average age. That doesn't really tell me a lot about each of you individually. So by law, the Census Bureau cannot release any identifiable information about individuals, households, or businesses, even to law enforcement agencies. So it's really just giving us a portrait of the population as a group. And the other point I want to mention is that it's really about where you are on April 1st, 2020. So, and the census really is trying to figure out how many people are in the household. The census recognizes that people experiencing homelessness, for example, also need to be counted. The census works really hard to count people at shelters, soup kitchens, mobile food vans, non-sheltered outdoor locations. And the final point I want to reiterate is that your community gets more federal funding, more dollars when everyone is counted. Thank you. I'll turn it over now to.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Laird. Let's hear from our Census Bureau representative, Ms. Matos. Can you update us on what is new about the census 2020? And at what point there was a question of whether or not a citizen would be on the census? That issue went to the Supreme Court. Can you also update us on that? And regardless of what information the Bureau collects, how does the census guarantee that information stays confidential?
Thank you. I'm a little short. Right, first of all, thank you so much for being here today, for taking the time to come here, because it's very important. Thank you to President Lemons for inviting us, and also Tara Tomlinson. Thank you so much. Yes, the newest thing about the census is that we're going to be able to answer it for the first time online. You're going to be able to answer it online. You're going to be able to answer it on a phone call, simple phone call, or if you prefer, you can answer it the traditional way. When you receive the questionnaire, fill it out, and mail it back. Let me add, besides what the professor said, I wanted for you to learn that the Census Bureau is a federal agency, and we are under the umbrella of the Department of Commerce. We have a lot of surveys, but the census is not a survey. is, as she said, is a counting of the people. Once again, the census is not a survey. We have a lot of surveys. For instance, current population survey. We count for statistical purposes only how many people are employed, how many people don't have a job. We also help and collaborate with a lot of countries. We go there and we help them conduct censuses. That helps a lot in third world countries where they need to build pipes, for the water, to bring water to a lot of people in rural areas. So, moving forward, the second question was about the citizenship question. The citizenship question is no longer an issue. We are not going to ask that question. It's not relevant to this 2020 census. But we would like to focus Thank you. We would like to focus in the importance of every person, every single living person in the United States of America and territories, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, American Samoa, to answer the census, regardless of your ethnicity, race, sexual orientation, faith. It's not important to us. We just want you to be counted. I'm sorry, what was the last question?
Okay, and then you have made notice we have some other Census Bureau representatives here today. Ms. Matos, can you explain to our audience what job opportunities the census collection brings to the New Yorkers and specifically Bronx residents?
Absolutely. Okay, so as you know, this is a massive operation, right? And sometimes individuals are afraid to answer the census, and we need to hire local people in those zip codes, in those pockets, with people who perhaps don't know the importance about the census, are afraid. So we are hiring 84,000 people in New York City to become enumerators. We're also hiring clerks, administrative assistants that are in the offices. So we would like for all the students to apply. My coworker, recruiting assistant Sarah Lynn, she's outside in a table. The link is 2020census.gov/jobs. She has more information. And one of the newest things is that one of the requirements is to be a citizen, to have a job, 18 years of age, have a social security number, and to be a citizen. So, but because the appropriation law, we're waiving that requirement to hire those legal residents who speak English and other language. For instance, Nigerian, French, Creole, Mandarin, Cantonese, Spanish. So we really want to hire local. And in your application, you're going to put your zip code. So when we need individuals to go in those pockets, those zip codes, perhaps they speak Mandarin, so we're going to hire those applicants who put in the assessment, I speak Mandarin, Cantonese, and English.
Thank you, Ms. Matos.
You're very welcome.
It's clear that a lot of effort, time, and money goes into ensuring that an accurate count is collected by the Census Bureau. Okay. Assemblymember Crespo, thank you for joining us. Can you tell us what the possible impact is for the Bronx and Bronx residents if the borough is undercounted? What might be the impact on Lehman College students?
Appreciate that. So first of all, I apologize for being a little bit late. Had a breakfast with the PSA 8 in my district, but this conversation is extremely important. A couple of things really quickly. A few years back, I introduced legislation in Albany to create the 2020 Count Commission, the statewide Count Commission, and we've been asking for state funding early on to get local community-based organizations doing the networking and the outreach in neighborhoods. And the credibility that Maria was talking about with hiring locally is also important in terms of who's presenting this information. There is distrust of government. And I have to say this publicly, the team and the staff here in New York and in the Bureau trying to get this done is an amazing team, and they're truly committed to the cause. I can't say the same for this federal administration. This is just me editorializing. I don't trust their interests. I don't trust their expectations for us in New York. Matter of fact, the whole citizenship question to me was a very clear effort to undermine the participation of our immigrant families. We've been able to push that back, and that question won't be there. But the damage is done. The fear has already been instilled in families. You look at the news every day and you hear about raids. Nobody wants a federal agent or anything related to federal government or even local law enforcement knocking on their door. The other thing they did, they cut the budget for the overall effort. And they streamlined, they said, well, we're gonna rely on technology. And when you think about relying on technology in neighborhoods like ours and in the Bronx, we still have a digital divide. How many people still today don't have access to quality Wi-Fi or other services, internet services at home or whatever, or a home computer to use to maybe log on? So we believe that effort and using that approach was also meant to in some ways undermine us. But what do we do best in our neighborhoods? We make $1 out of 15 cents. We know how to turn the tables on somebody who tries to step on us, right? That's what we do. And so what do we have to do with this effort? We have to use that same opportunity. For those that don't want somebody knocking on their door, you know what? Use that same internet service they tried to divide you with, use it against them. And we have to find resources to make that access available in our local communities for folks, because trust me, participation is extremely important. And all of us in this room have a responsibility to get the word out that the information is truly protected, that it cannot be used, for any other purposes other than getting a good count. And what's at stake? Billions of dollars. If I told you right now, everybody in this room, by the way, you dropped $50 outside, how many of you will get up and pick it up? But if I told you that because of the last undercount in the last census, as a state, we lost $2 billion a year in federal resources for the most pivotal programs, Meals on Wheels is a program depending on a census count. Housing dollars, subsidies, you name it, it's dependent on the census numbers. And so what's at stake? Resources for every one of your families, your neighborhoods, your friends, your families, the children in your community, your seniors in your community, the most vulnerable New Yorkers among us, their livelihood is at stake. We're talking about billions of dollars a year. And by the way, for as much as we talk about the immigrant families who may be undercounted because of their status and fear of participation, do you know who struggled the most in the Bronx in participating? The African American community had the lowest participation rates in Brooklyn and in the Bronx. If you look at assembly districts, my speaker, Carl Hasty, his district in the Northeast Bronx had the lowest participation rate. So that's something we have to talk about and figure out how do we get into those areas. And one more thing as part of this answer. The city has a great effort. They've launched their own 2020 Count Commission. Local communities have done so. The Bronx Borough President has a task force, a 2020 Bronx Count Commission as well. If anybody's interested, you could call the Borough President's office, ask to speak to Tracy McDermott, and get involved. I encourage everyone to look at the job opportunities. But also, if you just want to work in your local neighborhood, go to this website, 2020, it's Census Hard to Count Maps 2020.us. Census Hard to Count Maps 2020.us. You could go on that website. It's really interactive. It's easy to use, and you could map out your local community based on whatever district lines you want and see by ED, by electoral district, by 3 square blocks, what the count was, what the participation was in the last census. It'll give you a framework to know where in your neighborhood the outreach is needed most. So there's a lot that we can do, and it doesn't matter what title you have. I don't care what you do in life. I don't care what your aspirations are. A lot is at stake for each and every one of us, and each and every one of us can play a role in getting the word out that participation is crucial. Politically, it also is going to mean representation. Our districts are determined, the population of our district are determined by the census count. We are slated to lose at least 1 congressional seat in the state of New York. That we lose political power, we lose political presence in Washington, that hurts us. And where those lines are drawn can also mean less districts represented by people of color, represented by those of us who need the resources the most. So if you ask me what's at stake, I would say more than we can fathom and more than we're gonna realize, because it's not like the pain comes in one hit. It's spread out over the next 10 years. So we gotta get it right.
I just want to add a few points to what the Assemblymember Crespo said. Every single employee of the U.S. Census Bureau, we take an oath for life. It's called Code Title 13. It's a law. And if that law is broken, we're going to have a fine of $250,000, and it's 5 years in prison. So, moving forward, every single applicant who gets a job in the census will take that oath as well. So if that job lasts 6 months, after the 6 months are gone, the person is still accountable for the confidentiality of your information. So, moving forward, I'm a federal employee. Do you really think that a mother that is undocumented with 3 children is going to believe me? So that's why I need the trusted voices of elected officials, Lehman College, even the person from your churches, your temples, your mosques, because those are the individuals who the community trust. Another fact, children are undercounted. In the 2010, children were undercounted. So think about it. If we don't count in 2020 the newborn babies, in 2030, that child is going to be how old? So there goes the after-school program. So think about it. If you want economic development, right, and you have a mother with children in school and after-school program, and that mother is working, and they cut the after-school program because children were not counted, she's going to have the money, use the money for babysitting or quit the job. So it impacts you directly. And, oh, yes, important. $675 billion every year distributed for the next 10 years. So we want to count everyone once, only once, and in the right place. We want to shape our future. In the city of Boston, every person who did not answer the census lost $2,500 in services. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman Crespo and Ms. Matos, for those answers. It was very useful. And did they provide some enlightenment on this question to you guys? Okay, let's give it for Assemblyman Crespo, inspiring us to be part of the census. Okay, Mr. Higuera Lopez, you're the Deputy Director of the Mexican Studies Institute here at Lehman. What groups historically are typically undercounted in the census, and what is the best way to encourage their participation on the census?
Thank you. And again, thank you for the invitation. And I think that you've been hearing this word, right? Groups that had been undercounted. And Maria already mentioned children under the age of 5. Mr. Crespo mentioned about the Black population, also Hispanic population. So I'm just going to list the ones that have been traditionally undercounted. So we have the Black population, Hispanics and Latinx communities, Native Americans living on reservations, children under the age of 5, young adults between 30 and 49, renters, people experiencing homelessness, and also people living under special situations, renting houses. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this. So it's easy for us just to create these categories, right? But I think it would be good for us to understand, why do renters don't answer the census? Why do children under 5 are not counted, or why even youth are not counted? So, or our communities, the communities of color, why are we not counted? So I'm going to list also a few things that make it harder for the census to count these groups. And I would encourage you to see if these apply to you or anybody that you know. And maybe we can then move on to the next step, and how can we promote to be counted. So the US Government Accountability Office created this report where it mentions the typical groups or historically undercounted. And then they go into why is the group of children under 5 not being counted. So if you visualize this, a young mother that has a low income and she has all the needs of this baby to tend for, do you think it's a high priority for them to answer the survey? No. Again, also, youth, they're in school, they're studying, and then a form comes to you by mail or they call you. Is this a priority when you are facing midterms, when you have tests? So this is where the civic engagement part kicks in. Do we know what is it for, as the professor already mentioned? Why is this important? And I think that the most important thing for us to understand is that we fall under these groups, some of us, and some people that we might know. For example, here in New York, you probably know that there are some non-traditional housing conditions where you have a house that's split in half and you're having 2 families living there. Then they come and ask you how many people live here. The owner of the house will say 2, and they're living 8 people not counted. They're not gonna come back and ask them, oh, is there really 2 people living here? Because you already answered the question, the owner of the house. So this is why it is important for us in the college, and also, for example, in the Mexican Studies Institute here in CUNY, we have community partners. So we have points of touch in the community where we have 2 initiatives. One of them is the Education Opportunities Initiative, where we are in the community explaining how to apply to college, how to apply for FAFSA. So we are going to also be part of this movement where we are going to explain why is it important to be counted. And another thing is also literacy. Some people do not have the level of literacy or the language English, even though the census has been doing a lot of things to improve, to reach these people. We still have in this community here in the Bronx a lot of languages being spoken other than English. So it is also important for you that if you speak another language, for you to also to apply to those jobs so you can reach your specific community. So the other thing is that's also another factor that makes it hard to count. It's, as I mentioned, the English proficiency, cultural, linguistic, also minorities. The other thing is people, as Senator Crespo was mentioning, people distrust the government. And so I think we're here to really emphasize that this has nothing to do with your information being out there. So if you remember the last census, some of you, they ask you, of course, for your name, for your age, for your day of birth, your phone number. So people distrust this information. You're not just going out there giving this information, but you have to understand that this is the way that we are being counted. And so just to answer the point about how can we, well, the question was encourage participation, correct? Okay. So if we are already embedded in some places in the community where our voice is trusted, we can partner with the census, we can partner with the college, and we can give this information. But also, you can start at home, right? With your family members, with your mom, dad, or just siblings, neighbors, explaining the importance and also the impact that this will have in the community, as they were mentioning, with federal funds, with programs specifically for children, for roads, for infrastructure. How is this going to affect us in the next 10 years? And I think something that also has to be mentioned is that there's also another factor, this overcount. And usually the overcount is in other communities, and the resources will go to those communities. So if we know already that this community is undercounted, let's try to look for ways where we can engage each other, our fellow classmates, to be counted.
Thank you, City Guerra.
David, let me mention one more thing, I'm sorry. Another thing that regards to languages, we also have another initiative where we teach here at Lehman College Indigenous languages, because we have identified Indigenous languages being spoken outside of the countries of origin. We know that the Mexican community, we have here around, we have identified 3 specific Indigenous languages, and we're teaching them as a foreign language credit here at Lehman College. So you can take those classes too. And However, for us to reach that community, we need, and we're going to do some PSAs, and we're going to partner up with BronxNet to give these commercials in Mixteco, Zapoteco, Triqui, and Nahuatl. So these languages and these messages explaining the importance, and also in that little part where it says race, I think that's one of it that is like, okay, so I'm Latino, but am I black, white, Asian? Like, what is this, right? And you go to the other. So for us, with the indigenous populations, for us, we know that it's hard for us to count them because we really don't know. You put Mexican, but they're from a specific indigenous community. So for us, we're encouraging them to put other and then write the name of your community. That's Mixteco, Zapoteco, Triqui. So we can identify and then we can target the needs also. But for us also as Latinos, when you put other, just put other, right? If you identify as white, because if I hit Mexican and then I'm not white, so it's like I'm other, right? Mexican again. So those things, and there's gonna be people explaining how to fill out these forms, and don't be shy to ask the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Higuera. Now I would like to encourage you to, if you have any questions for the panelists, please write them down and pass them to your left. Somebody's going to be collecting the questions on the left side, on my right of the stage, okay? While that's being collected, in the same thought that Mr. Higuera had, what should Lehman College community be doing to help ensure an accurate count? I mean, we still have some months before the census actually starts, but what should we be doing? And it's open for any of the panelists.
I think you're doing, you're starting out good in the sense of getting the message out there of the importance of the census and also the impact. And I think now the challenge will be, as we were talking before we came down here, we were talking, the panelists, and how usually in schools and communities, we live or work or just go around in little silos. So the Department of Humanities, the Department of Anthropology, and we have difference, and we don't know each other. And sometimes what we need to understand is, or look for is the intersections what we have, and how can we work together and then promote this? For example, if you're a professor, or if you think that this is important for your classmates, ask your professor to bring you to the next one, to give you extra credit to come and attend these panels. So I think we can start doing something by also encouraging professors to give extra credit for these types of events that we have here, so we can reach our population here at Lehman College specifically. That's one of many, I think.
The only thing I would add is I think everybody who's here today would want to or will leave with a sense of, you know, an opportunity to be a part of this, right? And to talk about this topic and to ask others about it. But it's important to understand messaging. Think of this as a political campaign, right? When you bring conversations like this up, the attention span tends to be short, right? We want to talk about everything else but something like this. But you got to make it personal. How do you reach somebody? There has to be uniformity in message. You can't have one department saying, this is the reason why you got to participate. Somebody else is saying something different. All of a sudden, somebody hears two different, I'm like, you guys are all over the place. I just don't care that much. Make it personal. So I could tell you a million reasons why this is important, but I'm going to go to where it matters to people, their bottom line, right? If you have 2 seconds with somebody, if you have to have that elevator pitch, what would it be? Hey, do you realize that your kid's school resources are at stake? Do you realize that your grandmother's services are at stake? You got to make it personal to folks, all right? Find those talking points that could help you in a very quick moment interact with somebody and make this relevant to them, and always know where to direct them to get additional information. That's also key. And part of the resources that in the state we put 20 million, City Council has put another 20 million, and there's be additional funds rolled out, and there'll be nonprofits on the ground, and there'll be efforts like pop-up, spots in different communities, and there'll be through these census count commissions, there'll be centers that will promote the census and have people who can answer questions. Find out locally what is the closest resource to you so that you can direct somebody, oh, if you need more information because they're about to leave that elevator, hey, by the way, you need something, call this office, or go to this address. They can help you fill it out and walk you through it. Have that information readily available so that you can best promote the right encouragement to people that you'll come across.
I was about to say that. 3 points here. Yeah, one of the things that I have to do as a partnership specialist is to make the connection, the agreement with, for instance, Lehman College, and what he's doing about connecting me with those individuals who speak those languages, right? It's incredible because that way we are going to hire enumerators who can speak those languages, and that's the way we can go to those pockets. For instance, yes, I have a partnership agreement with Lehman College, but I also have a partnership agreement with the owner of a nail salon, because the people who do my nails, they speak Quechuan. So the owner is the one who's gonna tell them about the census and help them fill out their questionnaire. That's a way that we can help. So if you have, like I said before, your church, your temple, your mosque, your nail salon, it doesn't matter. Everybody should be counted. Also, we have group quarters enumeration. For instance, the shelters, the dorms, and we're also going to be on April 1st, 2020, in every platform at the trains, counting homeless individuals. So it's a lot of work, but I think that with your help, we will be able to do it. Yes, also thank you. This is very important. People also are thinking that if they get a job, they're going to lose their benefits. The Census Bureau is waiving that. So if you get a job as an enumerator, you're not going to lose your benefits like SNAP or Medicaid, Medicare. So please tell your friends. We all have a friend of a friend of a friend who has the brother of the wife that came from another place and is like, no, I'm not gonna, it doesn't matter. That is waived. Thank you.
The only talking point I would add is that if you are an introvert like me and someone rings your doorbell and you get all clammy and don't want to talk to people, then fill out the form the first time. Send it off, go online, then you don't have to talk to anyone. So.
Thank you. On the term of jobs, just to clarify, Ms. Matos, on the terms of jobs, are the jobs available only for citizens? Can you expand?
One of the requirements is to be a citizen, but we just waived that requirement for individuals who are legal residents and who can speak English, Spanish, Mandarin, Cantonese, French, Nigerian, other languages, because we're going to need them in those pockets that are hard to count.
Thank you. Other than what was already discussed, are there any other challenges in collecting an accurate count for any of the panelists?
The one I would reiterate is that it's, we've made a lot of noise around the impact to our immigrant families, but something the professor mentioned is extremely important. There are a lot of folks who won't respond because of their living conditions, where they are. And in our neighborhoods, we know this is happening. We know there are people double bunking. We know there are people living in their NYCHA family member's apartment and shouldn't be there. We know there are people who are subleasing illegal basements. We have to kind of reiterate the protected nature of this information and the fact that it is not used for any other purpose than getting an accurate count of population. And we need to sort of talk about that very openly as well. People should not be afraid. It does not matter what those circumstances are. Getting an accurate count far outweighs those concerns if we lose out on resources that are then invested into the needs of those families. And so one has an impact and leads to the other, right? The other problem. If you don't get the resources, we can't improve the conditions why what somebody needs to be in that situation. And so it's a catch-22. And understand, too, it's okay to talk about the distrust with government. But I think that the doctor made a very good point. If you answer it at first, right? If you respond through the questionnaire or if you go online and submit it, nobody has to come look for you. Nobody has come to your apartment to ask questions or see what conditions you're in. I know my wife won't let me invite anybody over unless the house is gone and been picked up. And I'm like, but that's not how we live. It's okay. So the kids have toys everywhere. The clothes, I don't care. Well, imagine if that's just with a friend. Imagine what it's like when some stranger's asking questions at the door. And by the way, they don't have to have a uniform on. Right? If it's anybody, I mean, we see the stories of people who, we saw that home invasion of somebody acting like they were a Con Edison. People just don't want nobody knocking on their door, especially us politicians, whether it's election time or not. So the reality is we need to promote the idea that if you answer up front, get that out of the way, there's no need for anybody to go out, and we can really then use those enumerators and those follow-up staff and those resources in targeted neighbors, and we can get the best count possible. There's a lot of reasons why somebody would not want to participate, but there's every reason for any one of us to care about an accurate count, and I think we need to sort of deliver that message in a very local way.
Okay. Thank you. You have something to say, Ms. Matos?
Yes, the last thing. From March 12th until April 27, you are going to be receiving 5 friendly reminders to answer the census.
5, not 3, guys. 5.
It's like a collection agency.
Yeah. So please do what he said. Go online, answer it, make that phone call, or fill it out, mail it back, the questionnaire, so you don't have that person knocking on your door, because we're going to send that person knocking on your door.
One last thing, and I know I talked about this with the president when he came to see me. I've been pitching the idea that a safe environment in every neighborhood is our local libraries. And we've actually had discussions with the Library Association, because I would like to see the libraries dedicate 1 or 2 of their computers and possibly assign a staff member or work with whether it's the Bureau or other partners to staff some of those sites, so that there's always a safe place for somebody to go and fill out their questionnaire, get help, or go online and do it, and somebody to walk them through it. A lot of us need that assistance, so in our families. So I think Lehman could consider doing that. Maybe you create a dedicated space within the campus with volunteers that the students themselves could volunteer to be there, to get the training necessary to help others fill out their questionnaires, and invite the students, their families, and the local community to come to a safe place at Lehman to do that. Something like that could be a very helpful effort as well.
Okay. Now we will be going to the questions the audience wanted to ask, and the first one is, why do we conduct the census every 10 years and not every 5 years or every 90 years? Ms. Matos? Yeah.
Historically, when under our first president, George Washington, they decided to be every 10 years. And we do not, the Census Bureau, they don't want to change that historic civic procedure method.
As an educator, how can I encourage parents to participate in the census? Dr. Leard?
Well, some others on this panel might be more qualified, especially maybe Assemblymember Crespo, who's used to getting talking points out to very specific populations. But as a parent myself, the way to appeal to me is to talk about what's at stake for my kids and their school funding. So I could imagine that you all might have other ideas, though.
No, I think that's it. It's making it personal to your audience, right? If you are a professor, that means and you're trying to reach the parents. Your children are the ones sitting in the classroom and need that tuition assistance. They need some of these other services and programs. So yeah, personalize it. If you're talking to seniors, talk about housing opportunities and/or food supplies for those that are impoverished. By the way, I don't know how many of you have seen what Meals on Wheels look like. I mentioned that as an example because this is something I've worked on tremendously with the number of people living in poverty and going hungry every single day in our communities. And when you look at the quality of the meals that are delivered to seniors, people who are on their own, who don't have family looking out for them, that is the one meal they get a day, and you wouldn't give that. I don't care how hungry you are, you would look at it with disdain. That's how awful the quality of these programs are, and much of that is due to the fact that resources have been scarce, and they've been, going to the lowest bidder possible and providing these meal options to families. We shouldn't live like that. And part of the reason is that if we allow ourselves to be undercounted, we lose the resources we need to improve those programs and to serve more families. So there really is a lot at stake. And trust me, everybody's impacted by this one way or another. We all like to live for the gram and promote the best of our lives, but the truth is we're all dealing with issues. We all got to understand what our challenges are. We all have family members who are going through it and neighbors who are going through it. So let's not be shy about talking about these impacts and these services. They matter to everyone. The person you least assume is impacted by them just as much. And so, and we need to just make this fun also. I think we need to stop thinking about this as some government, program that we have to participate in. Let's start making this about us. Let's make this a fun endeavor. Let's make it competitive. Let's start challenging neighboring counties and see who gets a better count. Let's throw a census party to promote the idea that, you know what? Yeah, when those, how they say make it rain? Let's talk about how we're gonna make it rain in our neighborhoods if we get the right resources. Let's just find creative ways to get the word out, right? Social media is a powerful tool, but the validators, it's who's giving that message. I'm a government official. The day I got elected, I became that. Right? I became one of those people. I'm wearing a suit. Somebody don't want to hear from me. They forget that I'm just a kid from the block, from Soundview, who's trying to do the best for my community. But once I, put on the suit and tie, have the title, it already creates that. But if all of us are talking about it, then they realize this is not just a government effort. This is really a social responsibility and an important one in terms of securing those dollars. So there's a way to message to everyone. Just think about who do you interact with the most, find the talking points that would matter to that population, and just start promoting that as best you can.
Just a quick example, I think if we put numbers to it, I think it's good. An undercount of the last census of 1% of children translated into a decrease of 8.2 million into the CHIP program in Texas. So that's only 1%. So now imagine if we have already identified, and this is only one program of the 300 programs, federal programs that affect our community. So if we can just imagine, this is only for CHIP, right? So 8.2 million. I think that if this could change just by answering this census, I think that would be a good talking point.
Okay, thank you. That's all the time that we have today to discuss the census. And I also want to thank our panelists for coming and sharing their knowledge and expertise with us. And obviously, this was a very broad overview of the U.S. Census, and that's why it's the first in a series of events that are being planned here at Lehman and around our Bronx community to speak about the census. Our next scheduled discussion will take place here at Lehman on December 2nd from 6 to 7:30. The Census Bureau recruiters will return also on November 12th, so keep an eye on your emails and any contact information that we can reach out to you. And please look for updates also at the Lehman College website about the census resources and for more information about the event, and we look forward to working with you to make the Bronx count. Thank you for coming, and get to your next destination safely. I would also like to invite the panelists to stay a few more moments with us, if you can. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for coming. I hope this little overview is gonna encourage you to tell your neighbors, to tell your family members to count themselves in our census. Okay. No, you talk.
Hello, guys. There is a table from the Census Bureau right outside, so please, I encourage you to please visit them to look for job opportunities with the Census Bureau. Thank you.